My mom changed the locks and told me I had no home. 2 days later, their lawyer emailed, "We have a problem. Call immediately." The text from my mother pierced through the silence of my studio apartment at 11:17 p.m., glowing like a warning flare against my nightstand. For a heartbeat, I considered ignoring it. I should have trusted that instinct. "We changed all the locks today. You don't have a home anymore. Try making it on your own now." Good luck with that. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't feel like a wrecking ball to the chest. My finger hovered over the screen, trembling slightly, as if the glass might crack under the weight of what those words meant. I waited for the tears to come. I waited for the anger, the panic, the desperate urge to call and plead. But what flooded through me instead was something I hadn't experienced in years: absolute, crystalline clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I didn't collapse on my bedroom floor like they probably imagined I would. Instead, I smiled. Because here's what my mother, my father, and my spoiled younger sister didn't understand: home was never that house. It was never theirs to take away. And what I was about to do next would completely demolish the comfortable little kingdom they'd built on the back of my labor, my money, and my blind obedience. I have zero regrets. Not a single one. If you've ever been used like a workhorse by your own family, drained until you had nothing left, then tossed aside like yesterday's garbage, then you already know exactly what this kind of betrayal tastes like. Stay with me, because this isn't some petty revenge story. This is about justice served cold, calculated, and backed up by legal documentation that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. My name is Layla Richardson. I'm 28 years old, a financial analyst with a brain wired for numbers and a memory that forgets nothing, which turned out to be both my greatest weakness and my most powerful weapon. I grew up in a beautiful colonial-style house in Charlotte, North Carolina, with white columns on the front porch and magnolia trees in the backyard that bloomed white every spring. From the street, we looked like something straight out of Southern Living magazine, the perfect American family. Inside those walls, perfection was a carefully rehearsed lie. And I was the stagehand who kept the whole production running while everyone else took their bows. The exploitation started small. That's how it always does, right? Slow enough that you don't notice the trap closing until it's too late. I was 13 when my father stopped asking and started commanding. "Layla, grab the toolbox. We're resealing the driveway." Or, "Layla, hold this ladder steady. I'm cleaning the gutters." My weekends vanished into home improvement projects while other kids my age were at the movies or the skating rink. While my classmates were learning to drive and going to football games, I was learning how to install subway tile and replace warped deck boards. My hands were constantly covered in cuts and calluses from handling power tools. I was too young to operate safely. My shoulders ached from carrying 2x4s. My knees were perpetually scraped from crawling around in the attic running electrical wire. Every time I complained, my father had the same response ready: "You're stronger than any son I could have asked for, kiddo." He'd ruffle my hair like that somehow made the exhaustion disappear. Like praise was payment enough. My mother would smile her approval from the kitchen window. "Family takes care of family, Layla. You're so capable. Your sister Emily is more delicate." Delicate? That was family code for the favorite child who will never lift a finger. Emily, my younger sister by 4 years, was the golden child who could do no wrong. While I was the workhorse buried in the dirt, she was the prized flower soaking up all the sunlight and attention. I believed their lies back then. I believed that hard work built character, that this was what love looked like, just wrapped in sweat and splinters. By 16, I was so thoroughly conditioned that saying no felt like committing a crime against the family. Then the financial exploitation began. Subtle as poison in sweet tea. "Money's a little tight this month," my mother mentioned casually one Thursday evening when I was 17. I'd just gotten my first real job as a hostess at a local steakhouse. "Could you help with the electric bill? Just this once." She said it so casually, like she was asking me to pass the salt shaker at dinner. Just this once turned into a pattern that would drain my bank accounts for the next decade. The requests escalated gradually. First, it was utilities, then car insurance payments, then emergency repairs that somehow always needed my immediate financial intervention. The manipulations were gentle, almost loving. They made me feel important, needed, like I was solving real problems for the people I loved most. "You're such a lifesaver, honey," Mom would say, hugging me tight. "We don't know what we'd do without you." By the time I turned 21, I realized with growing horror that my parents hadn't just accepted my help, they'd completely restructured their budget around it. I wasn't contributing to the family expenses anymore. I was the family expenses. I was the invisible income stream funding their lifestyle while they quietly hoarded every dollar they earned for Emily's future. When I asked about family vacations or why we never seemed to have money for anything fun, I got the same rehearsed answer: "Those aren't priorities right now, Layla." were focused on stability. Meanwhile, Emily got a brand new Jeep Wrangler for her 16th birthday, powder blue with custom leather seats. Her college tuition at a private university in Virginia, paid in full for years upfront. And all expenses paid, summer studying abroad in Paris. Sure, why not? I was working 14-hour days as a junior analyst, eating leftover pizza at my desk to save money, then coming home to fix the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom or power wash the siding or replace the water heater. But here's the insidious part about this kind of abuse: love disguises itself as logic when you've been trained from childhood to accept crumbs and call it a feast. I told myself it was fair because I was the strong one, the responsible one, the capable daughter who didn't need as much help. Being dependable made me feel valued even as it hollowed me out from the inside. The first crack in the illusion appeared about 16 months ago. Small things at first, whispers that stopped when I walked into a room. Family planning conversations that suddenly ended when I appeared. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I had no proof. Not until that night in March. I came home late from work, exhausted from closing quarter-end reports, my eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets for 15 straight hours. I was heading straight to my childhood bedroom when I heard voices drifting from the den. I almost walked past. Almost. Then I heard my name and my feet turned to lead. "The deed has both our names only," my mother was saying, her voice low but clear. "Layla doesn't realize everything she contributed was voluntary. She won't get a dime when we sell." My father laughed, this deep, ugly sound I'd never heard from him before. "She's never even asked to see paperwork." Classic Layla. All heart, zero business sense. Then Emily's voice, curious and slightly amused. "But won't she expect something? I mean, she's put in a lot over the years." My mother's response was ice cold. "Expect what? She gave gifts. Gifts don't entitle you to ownership. We don't owe her anything." I stood frozen in the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall to keep myself upright. My vision tunneled. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. They were planning to sell the house I'd painted, maintained, and poured tens of thousands of dollars into, and cut me out completely. My own family, plotting like criminals, dividing stolen goods. I didn't storm into that den. I didn't scream or cry or demand explanations. Instead, I walked silently to my bedroom, opened my laptop, and began building the case that would burn their world to the ground. For the next 7 months, I lived a double life that would have made a spy jealous. By day, mild-mannered financial analyst, crunching numbers and attending budget meetings. By night, document hunter, evidence collector, and architect of my family's destruction. Every receipt, every email, every bank transfer, every text message, they all became pieces in a legal puzzle I was carefully assembling. My father's arrogance became my greatest asset. He was sloppy with record-keeping, overconfident that I'd never question anything. He'd Venmo me money with vague notes like help with mortgage or temporary loan, and I'd screenshot every single one. I went back through 8 years of bank statements, highlighting every transfer I'd made to their accounts. The numbers were staggering when I finally tallied them up: $47,000 in direct mortgage payments, $31,000 in home renovation materials, $22,000 in utility bills during their supposed financial emergencies, $14,000 in property tax contributions. Total, $114,000 in documented cash contributions. But the money was just the beginning. I cataloged 14 years of unpaid labor repainting the entire exterior, contractor estimate, $9,200. Replacing the roof shingles, contractor estimate $13,500. Installing new kitchen countertops, contractor estimate $11,000. Landscaping the entire yard, contractor estimate $7,500. Updating all the bathroom fixtures, contractor estimate $8,800. I built spreadsheets so detailed and comprehensive that a forensic accountant would have wept with joy. Every claim was backed by photographic evidence, receipts, or contractor estimates for comparable work. I even found old emails where my mother had explicitly promised, "We'll make this up to you once things stabilize," and my father writing, "You'll always have a home here, kiddo." Once my evidence was ironclad, I quietly consulted with 3 different real estate attorneys. I didn't tell them who I was at first. I just presented the facts and asked if someone in this situation would have a legal claim. All 3 said the same thing: yes. Absolutely yes. My name might not be on the deed, but equity isn't always about whose signature is on official documents. It's about proof: bank records, labor documentation, and a clear pattern of financial contribution with a reasonable expectation of benefit. Under North Carolina law, I potentially had claims for unjust enrichment, quantum merit, and constructive trust. In plain English, they benefited from my contributions under circumstances that made it unjust for them to keep everything. So I waited. I watched. I documented every interaction. And then on a cold October evening, that text message arrived. We changed all the locks today. You don't have a home anymore. IT didn't break me. It completed my case. That smug little message was the final piece of evidence I needed, crystal clear proof of malicious intent. They weren't just excluding me from future benefits. They were actively trying to harm me, to make me homeless, to punish me for what? Being useful. They thought they were locking me out. What they'd actually done was hand me a smoking gun with their fingerprints all over it. I slept better that night than I had in years. At 8:30 a.m. sharp the next morning, I walked into my office with a coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. My attorney, Sarah Blackwell, a bulldog in designer heels, answered on the first ring. Layla, good morning. I stared out my office window at the Charlotte skyline, watching the morning sun cut through the autumn haze. File the petition, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. She didn't need clarification. We'd been preparing for this moment for months. Consider it done. 48 hours later, my parents' attorney called my cell phone in what I can only describe as barely controlled panic. Miss Richardson, we need to discuss this situation immediately. This is extremely serious. Of course it was serious. Their neat little scheme was unraveling, and I just yanked the thread that would collapse the entire thing. But I didn't call back right away. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the anxiety and betrayal they'd inflicted on me for years. I wanted them to understand that the daughter they'd used as an ATM and free labor had grown into a woman who understood exactly how power worked and how to wield it. The mandatory mediation came 8 days later in a sterile conference room downtown. All glass walls and uncomfortable modern furniture. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unforgiving brightness. A long conference table dominated the space. My legal team sat on one side, Sarah and her junior associate, both armed with file boxes full of evidence. Their side was still empty when I arrived. Then the door opened and my family walked in. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week, red-faced, rumpled, his usual swagger completely gone. My mother wore her church outfit, probably thinking it would make her look sympathetic and victimized. Emily trailed behind them, looking confused and vaguely annoyed, like this was all a massive inconvenience. For the first time in months, I was in the same room with all three of them. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no residual love or longing for reconciliation. Just cold professional focus. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't acknowledge them. I simply placed a thick accordion file on the table and slid it toward the center. What the hell is this? My father demanded, his voice carrying that familiar tone of dismissive authority that used to make me shrink. Not anymore. Sarah opened the file with deliberate precision, like a surgeon making the first incision. Documentation of my client's financial contributions to the property located at 4782 Willow Creek Drive, Charlotte, as well as comprehensive evidence of labor and materials provided over a 14-year period. Inside were copies of everything I'd gathered: bank statements showing $47,000 in direct mortgage payments, receipts for $31,000 in home improvement materials, utility payment records during their emergencies, contractor estimates for work I performed myself valued at over $50,000. But the most devastating evidence was a printed stack of text messages and emails where they'd explicitly requested my help, promised it was temporary, and assured me they'd make things right once their situation improved. My father flipped through the pages, his confident expression crumbling with each turn. My mother tried to interrupt several times, but her voice kept catching as the scope of the documentation became clear. Emily just sat there, her eyes darting between the papers and her parents' faces, finally understanding she wasn't the beloved daughter in a loving family. She was a beneficiary in a calculated scheme to exploit her sister. This is ridiculous, my father finally sputtered. Those were gifts. Family helping family. Layla never asked for any kind of formal arrangement. This is extortion. Sarah's response was calm, precise, and absolutely lethal. Mr. Richardson, Sarah said, her voice professionally neutral, these documents demonstrate a clear pattern of solicited contributions made under the explicit representation that they were temporary assistance during financial hardship. She pulled out another stack of papers, bank statements I'd subpoenaed through pre-litigation discovery, showing my parents' actual financial position during the periods when they'd claimed to be struggling. You'll notice, Sarah continued, that during the same period when you were requesting thousands of dollars from my client for emergency expenses, you maintained savings accounts with balances exceeding $165,000 and investment portfolios worth approximately $210,000. The silence in that room was suffocating. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Emily looked like she might be sick. Furthermore, Sarah said, pulling out a printed screenshot of that text message blown up to fill an entire page. The message Mrs. Richardson sent to my client, she read it aloud slowly, letting each word land like a hammer. We changed all the locks today. You don't have a home anymore. Try making it on your own now. Good luck with that. Demonstrates clear malicious intent to deprive my client of any benefit from her contributions. I watched my parents' faces as reality crashed down on them. That house, their fortress, their kingdom. Their weapon against me was slipping through their fingers like water. My mother tried to speak first, her voice shaking. Layla, sweetie. This is all a misunderstanding. You never meant for me to keep records, I interrupted, speaking directly to her for the first time. My voice was steady, calm, almost gentle. You never meant for me to understand property law. You never meant for me to realize I've been subsidizing your lifestyle, while you saved every penny for Emily's future. My father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. After everything we did for you, raising you, housing you, feeding you, after using me as free labor for 14 years? I cut him off. After taking $114,000 of my money under false pretenses? After planning to sell the house I helped build and maintain without giving me a single cent? Sarah laid out our demands with surgical precision. My client is not seeking simple repayment of her monetary contributions. She's seeking recognition of her rightful ownership stake in the property based on those contributions, and her reasonable expectation of benefit. Given the documented evidence of financial investment and substantial labor, we're demanding a 42% ownership interest in the property, or equivalent monetary compensation based on current market value. The room exploded. My father started shouting about ungrateful children and legal blackmail. My mother dissolved into tears, wailing about family loyalty and how I was destroying everything we built together. Emily just sat there in stunned silence, probably calculating how much her inheritance had just evaporated. But I remained perfectly calm. I'd spent 7 months preparing for this exact moment, and their emotional manipulation tactics couldn't touch me anymore. I was done being their victim. Sarah let them vent for exactly 90 seconds. I watched her time it before cutting them off. We can settle this through mediation, or we can go to trial. I'll be frank with you. My client has an exceptionally strong case. North Carolina law is very clear on unjust enrichment and quantum merit claims. If this goes to a judge, you'll not only lose on the merits, but you'll be responsible for my client's legal fees as well as your own. She paused, letting that sink in. I strongly advise you to settle. My father tried to bluster and threaten. Their attorney, a nervous man who clearly hadn't been told the full story before taking their case, tried to negotiate for a smaller percentage. But Sarah didn't budge, and neither did I. We broke for private consultations. In our conference room, Sarah was practically glowing. They're going to settle, she said confidently. They know they can't win. The only question is whether they accept your terms now, or waste another $60,000 in legal fees before accepting them later. She was right. 5 hours of tense negotiations later, we had a preliminary agreement. I would receive a 42% ownership stake in the property, with immediate right to force a sale if we couldn't agree on the disposition of the asset. The formal settlement agreement was signed 2 weeks later. The first thing I did wasn't move back into that house. That place was poisoned, contaminated by too many years of lies and exploitation. Every room held memories of being used, manipulated, taken for granted. Besides, they'd changed the locks, remember? They'd made it clear I wasn't welcome there, so I exercised my legal right as a 42% owner to force the sale of the property. My parents fought it, of course. They begged, threatened, tried to negotiate a buyout they couldn't actually afford. But the settlement agreement was crystal clear. If we couldn't reach a mutual agreement on the property's use within 60 days, any owner could demand liquidation. The house went on the market in December. It sold in February for $698,000, significantly more than my parents expected, thanks to all those improvements I'd funded over the years. The new kitchen, the updated bathrooms, the landscaping, the roof, the fresh paint. My share came to $293,160 before legal fees and taxes. After everything was settled, I walked away with $251,000. But here's the beautiful poetic justice of it all. My parents had been counting on that house sale to fund their retirement. They'd planned to pocket the full $698,000, buy a smaller place for maybe $350,000, and invest the remaining $348,000 for their golden years. Instead, they got $404,840 before their own legal fees and taxes, which were substantial. After everything, they barely cleared $325,000, enough to buy a modest townhouse in a less desirable neighborhood with almost nothing left over for retirement savings. Their dreams of a comfortable, wealthy retirement vanished overnight. The dividend wasn't just financial. The emotional return was priceless with my share of the proceeds. I bought a beautiful one-bedroom condo in uptown Charlotte, with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It's smaller than the family house, but it's completely, totally, absolutely mine. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every design choice is mine alone. Nobody can take it from me. Nobody can weaponize it against me. Nobody can hold it over my head as leverage. For the first time in my adult life, I feel truly free. My family still tries to contact me. My father sends emails dripping with guilt and rage after everything we sacrifice for you. This is how you repay us? You've destroyed your family over money. I hope you're proud of yourself. My mother leaves voicemails soaked in fake remorse. Family is supposed to forgive, Layla. You're going to regret this bitterness when we're gone. Don't throw away your family over pride. Emily has tried to play peacemaker, suggesting family therapy and claiming she never knew about their plans to exclude me from the house proceeds. But she was sitting at that kitchen table when they discussed cutting me out. She knew exactly what was happening, and she was perfectly fine with it as long as she benefited that I don't respond to any of them. I've blocked their numbers, set their emails to automatically delete, and moved forward with my life. 8 months have passed since the house sale closed. 8 months since I walked away from the family that treated me like a resource to be exploited, rather than a daughter to be loved. Sometimes people ask if I have regrets, if I feel guilty, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is simple no. Not even a little bit. Because here's what they don't understand: I gave them opportunity after opportunity to do the right thing. I could have confronted them after overhearing that den conversation. I could have demanded to be included in their plans. I could have begged for basic fairness and respect. But I already knew how that would end, with more manipulation, more guilt trips, more promises they had no intention of keeping. So instead, I chose documentation over confrontation, evidence over emotion, legal strategy over family therapy. I fought them with their own paper trail, and I won. Now, when I sit in my living room watching the sunset paint the Charlotte skyline in shades of golden rose, I smile because the locks they changed don't matter. I have my own locks now on my own door, in my own home that nobody can take away. I smile because the house they tried to keep has been sold, and 42% of that money is mine, earned through years of contribution they tried to pretend didn't exist. I smile because that cruel text message they sent to break me became the final damning piece of evidence that proved their malicious intent. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who think they know you best. They assume you'll always be the person they've conditioned you to be: compliant, giving, easy to manipulate and control. But people grow, people learn, and sometimes people fight back. My story isn't unique. Families exploit their own members every single day, counting on shame and loyalty to keep their victims silent. They count on you not keeping records. They count on you not understanding your rights. They count on you being too emotionally destroyed to fight back. Don't let them count on you. Document everything. Understand your rights. Recognize that love doesn't look like exploitation, and family doesn't mean unconditional servitude. And when they finally push you too far, when they send that message or make that threat that crosses the line, remember you're not the villain for protecting yourself. You're the hero of your own story. The locks they changed, they don't matter anymore. I have my own damn locks now.